think we're going to move next to our speaker that's coming up next. We are pleased to introduce Brian Hack, a CPA, CMA, and principal of the BHC Group. Brian's consulting career began in 2002, learning, implementing, and project managing enterprise resource planning, which is ERP systems, and other systems surrounding ERP. After 10 years in this role, he joined a startup management consulting firm where he grew the firm and provided valuable software selection services and implementation support to his clients as either a project manager, business analyst, subject matter expert, and/or project sponsor or advisor to ensure that those implementation projects succeeded as planned. In April 2016, Brian founded the BHC Group and established his firm as a niche boutique consulting firm, providing clients with a more accessible personal approach to services as opposed to that of the large corporate consultancy firms. Over the years, Brian has gained valuable experience in advising and supporting companies through their journey of software selection and support when looking for new systems and technology. He is supported by a team of several seasoned and experienced consultants that bring a wealth of knowledge from different industries. As like-minded business professionals, they collaborate to provide expert and innovative solutions that enable clients to achieve their technology objectives in one place. Apart from advisory roles, they are willing to roll up their sleeves and perform the services themselves to ensure the objectives are implemented successfully. With the team divided between Winnipeg and Vancouver, Brian has expanded his company to provide both cities with a high level of expertise and innovative professional services that they are proud to offer. Without further ado, we welcome Brian.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that introduction. Pleasure to be here today to speak to the group on ERP 101, the basic understanding of enterprise resource planning. So let's get this going here. So that's me, a CPA CMA and the principal of the BHC Group. Thanks again for the background introduction there, so I don't need to go into that myself. So we'll keep moving on. And just like Carissa, I'm going to turn off my camera just as we move through the presentation to help with the broadband experience, and then I'll turn it on at the end for any Q&A. So let me do that. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so just very quickly on the BHC and what we offer. So again, we're a niche boutique consultancy, and we offer a variety of services to help our companies and clients leverage the software and technology they own. So we do that by performing an ERP evaluation. So understanding what our clients have in place today, what they're using, what they're not, and where they want to go. We help with software selection. Again, ERP related, but we can help with other types of technology as well. ERP consulting, ERP implementation support. So again, we're a seasoned of consultants, and ERP are our domain. So we know how they work, how to implement them, what that process and that life cycle looks like of the implementation. So that's where we can really help our customers. Depending on the software, we can do ERP upgrades and optimization to take advantage of any features and functions and make the system run more smoothly. Business process management. So that's a big one. We like to help our customers understand the process that they follow, how we can make improvements and not necessarily re-engineer the process, but to streamline the process for them. Data management. So when you've got data moving from one ERP system to another, we can help export the data, manage the data, and bring it into your new system. And then change management. So any project or technology change is going to require a change management from an end user perspective. How do you get buy-in from resources? How do you get executive level support? We offer services there. And anything specifically related to Microsoft Dynamics GP. That's a tier 2 ERP system, which I'll talk about the tiers in a few minutes. But that's something that I've been implementing for over 20 years now. Collectively, my team has 100 years experience with that application. So we do have legacy customers that we help on that system and then help them as they want to move to something new. So just a quick snapshot of our team. So I've got about 6 or 7 active consultants right now. split between Winnipeg and Vancouver, and we've got a bench of about 20 consultants that as we find work for them and based on their availability, then they'll perform those services and work with our team and our customers. So setting the tone for today, so what I want to hopefully get across to everyone on the call is understanding what is ERP, what are the features and benefits of ERP, what are the myths, and when do you think you'll be ready for ERP? And then how do you source and implement ERP? And then some final food for thought and some takeaways that you might want to think about and as you go through this journey of ERP. Okay, so what is ERP, right? So ERP systems help manage and automate your business through different business processes such as financials, human resources, supply chain management, manufacturing, warehousing, the list goes on. The goal of the ERP is to provide a centralized, integrated view of your organization's operations and data. So having all the information in one place has one version of the truth, and everyone can rely on that same data. The objective is to allow businesses to make informed decisions and to optimize operations. So the quicker you have access to your data, the quicker you can make decisions to then pivot and increase a particular product or decrease not order that product again, or how do you streamline things to make it quicker for your customers. The outcome of the ERP is to help manage and automate and simplify critical processes. This system allows for input and can drive workflow as part of a setup that the workflow is then reviewed and streamlined. So with the click of a button, you can have invoices sent to customers or purchase orders electronically sent to vendors versus exporting that purchase order to Excel, creating an email, then going into the email, searching for the attachment, attaching it, and then sending it manually one at a time. Again, there's a lot of manual effort involved, whereas if we have a ERP system that we can automate these critical processes, that's going to save time. Its ERP system supports all businesses, so small, medium enterprise to large private and public companies. So it's not just for the larger organizations. Depending on, and I guess this ties into the next point, the ERP systems tie into typically 3 different tiers or categories. So depending if you're small, medium enterprise, or if you're a large private or public company, that's going to depend on what tier of product you look for. So the tier 3 software, that might be something like QuickBooks Online or Simply Accounting, Wave Accounting, FreshBooks, Xero. They are generally, relatively inexpensive on a month-to-month subscription basis. Wave, for example, is free, so you can't get cheaper than that. And other ones can run from $10, $20 to $100 a month in a subscription fee, and those are typically where small companies will start. From there, as they grow their business and those smaller systems aren't quite cutting it, that's when you look at moving to a tier 2 system. So some products that you may have heard of would be NetSuite. Microsoft have a couple products, whether it's Business Central or Great Plains or Navision. Sage products, there's Sage X3, there's Sage Intacct. They have more products as well, Sage as a vendor. There's Acumatica, Infor, they've got different products, Cispro. So all of those are sort of tier 2 systems. And those will be your more true full ERP, where you've got modules around the financials, the distribution side, the HR and payroll, supply chain or manufacturing or CRM. So that's sort of where you'll find most small, medium enterprise. And then the large organizations that are private or public, multinational, could be in hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue into billions of dollars of revenue a year. They're using tier 1 software that, some names could be JD Edwards or SAP, HANA, Workday. Microsoft has a product in there called Supply Chain Management or Finance and Operations. So understanding where your business is today and where you want to be, a lot of times companies will start in that tier 3, and as they grow, move into tier 2, and as they grow even more, into tier 1. Features of ERP. So the feature, like the number one feature of an ERP system, is a centralized database. So what that means is all data sits in one database on the back end and the server, and information comes in and information comes out of that database. It makes information gathering easier. It's a relational database. So there can't be anything that doesn't fit or make sense go into the database. There has to be specific business rules that allow for data to exist. When we look at module architecture, so a lot of ERP systems are designed with different modules that allow companies to implement those modules when and if it makes sense. So typically we see companies start with the financial modules. So that would be your general ledger, your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, your bank, or checkbook, sometimes fixed assets. Then you get into your distribution type of modules. So inventory management, purchase orders, sales orders. Then sometimes with the sales order side, you see the CRM relationship as well, or customer relationship management. And so companies can decide to pick and choose what to use and when to roll it out. And also some other systems come with HR, payroll, and even more if you have field service management or warehousing. Again, different ERPs will have different industry focus, and that's when you'll want to start looking at the different modules that those ERP systems provide. And what's nice with that is you don't have to do everything at once. So you have a phased approach to bring in the functionality that you need. Integration. So an ERP system integrates all of the core processes and business functions together. So for example, sales, inventory, production, procurement, all within one system. When we talk integration, we can have as an example, we can say, all right, the buyer for a particular purchasing department, they're going to look at the inventory levels of a particular product. So you've got the buyer in the purchasing group looking at inventory in the warehouse. Then you've got a customer sales rep selling inventory products. They're looking at the inventory module in the warehouse. So as the purchaser is looking at the inventory levels, maybe the min-max quantities or what's the on hand, they can then start to buy more that the customers or the sales side can then sell. So you're getting integration between one module to the other. So the whole organization is seeing the same data. That's very beneficial and very powerful when trying to optimize your business. Customization. So some systems allow for customization. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it gives you that flexibility to tailor the system by changing core code to fit your business process. The downside is if you're planning on doing an upgrade, or if you're doing troubleshooting with a tech support person, they may not know that you have custom code or that you have something in place that's different, and that can then cause delays in troubleshooting and going through upgrades. That can also take additional time and money because you have to upgrade the custom code and then do all the testing. A workaround to customization is the term personalization. Some newer ERP systems that are cloud-based have a lot more flexibility in defining user-defined fields or setting up different process flows that can mimic your particular business. So when you're working with ERP and implementing a system, definitely speak to your vendor about how do I personalize the system without changing the core code through customization. Automation is another big one. So this is oftentimes when customers start to plan and get ready for an ERP system. This is a big driver for that. I mentioned it earlier where you can have the system automatically send out purchase orders, so you don't have to manually export out a PO or print the file, open an email, and attach it. The system can do that. Another process automation, as an example, sticking on the purchasing side, can be when a buyer is looking to see, okay, how much inventory do we have on hand, and what POs do I need to place this week in order to have enough product for my manufacturing or for my customers. So oftentimes ERP systems have a feature or a module or a function called suggest purchase orders. So when you're setting up your inventory in your warehouse, you set up your min-max levels, your reorder points, your buying quantities, who your primary and secondary vendors are, and so on. So this process called suggest POs will actually look at your inventory, see, okay, how much inventory do I have on hand? When do I need to reorder? And then what volumes do I need to reorder? You can also look at demand planning and tie in and say, okay, I'm expecting to sell X, Y, and Z over the next 3 weeks. So therefore include that in the suggest POs, and then spit out a report at the end of it and say, hey, buyer, you should buy X, Y, and Z items for ABC quantities from vendors ABC. And then with the click of a button, you can review, you can accept or reject or edit and adjust, and then hit the send button, and off those POs go to all those different vendors. So automation is very key when it comes to helping run your organization. Real-time reporting. So ERP systems are great for this. It allows for reporting, analytics, having dashboards or KPIs to, in real time, tell you how your business is doing and if there's any transactions or any steps you need to take to pivot to be more adaptable to the market. And scalability. So oftentimes, as I mentioned, companies will start when they're small, or they'll get to the next level and get into that tier 2 system. They're going to stay on that system for quite some time. So the scalability supports the growth of the business. If you're adding more resources or more users to the system, adding more modules, maybe the volume of transactions is skyrocketing. You want a system that can handle the growth of your business and can scale with you. And yeah, that's a big one, because if you think about it, if you're going to double the size of your business, you're not really going to want to double the size of your workforce. So you've got to use technology and the systems to help offset that growth. Benefits of the ERP system. So when we're looking at increasing efficiency and productivity, definitely I've given a couple examples already in how the system can increase efficiency and productivity of your business. Access to real-time data. So by data being entered into the system and posted, that access to data is there for anyone in the organization to see, granted they have the security permissions to see the data. So you may not want somebody in the warehouse looking at financial information. Security can lock down who can see what data. Enhanced visibility. So again, if you're the CFO or if you're on the finance side and you need to see across different modules, you have the ability to do that. And again, more information you have at your fingertips, the better decision-making you can make, or the quicker decision-making you can make. Better collaboration and communication. So ERP systems enable collaboration between departments and allowing access for employees to the same data to work more effectively and efficiently. So it's important that everyone's looking at the same data set and relying on that same data set. Better compliance and traceability. So ERP systems can definitely help food industry meet various different compliance regulations, provide ease of traceability of products throughout the supply chain. So whether you need to set up lot tracking or serial tracking, if you're using inventory module, you can see the bill of materials and you can see which items make up that particular product. If someone comes to you and says, hey, this batch of product, we need to know where it went and what end products and which customers received it, very quickly you can trace that information through the system, looking for that key compliance information. And also on the accounting front too, if you're following GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles or IFRS, all the financials are tracked as well for accounting and compliance perspective and audit. Improve customer service. So again, giving employees access to that real-time data, to those customers' order history. They can look for the relevant information to service the customers better. They can see buying habits of customers. You can do specific marketing campaigns to help increase sales. Again, that's just a good way to keep growing and growing your sales side of the business. Cost saving. So an ERP, as people think, it costs a lot of money to implement an ERP, which we'll talk about later as well. But there's also the cost savings, right? You can reduce waste. You can improve your inventory management. Maybe move to just-in-time inventory so you don't have those carrying costs. You can optimize production. Again, by automating the system, you may not need employees to be spending their time doing data entry and looking for things. They can actually be actively working in the business versus on the systems that run the business. All of those things can help save money from the business or for the business. So myths of ERP. So again, I think people, before they jump into this, have a lot of concerns, and they're valid. And this is just through industry speak or working with their peers and hearing, oh, it's so expensive. Projects go over budget. They never get done on time. It just costs money and more money. That can happen, but that can happen with any technology change. But when you look at the two expensive components, there's many ways to break that down. First, the cost of not doing something can be more expensive than the cost of doing something. If you have one customer that you miss an order on, you can lose that customer for life. If you buy too much inventory that you can sell, you're sitting forever and have to put that inventory and have to sell that inventory at a loss. All those things can hurt your business pretty quickly. When we look at the cost of purchasing software, or you can have software subscriptions. So you're paying $50, $100, $200 a month per user for a particular product that you just expense every month. Or you can purchase the software and say, okay, I'm going to buy it and it's going to cost me $50,000 and I'm going to amortize that over 3 years and follow your accounting rules. When you look at government grants, there's so many out there, and we'll hear more later in the presentation on how to get funding to help with the implementation of ERP, maybe more so from the services side than the software side. But again, anything to help implement and bring your total cost of ownership down is key. And then lastly, when you're looking at the licensing costs, some vendors and products that you can look at, they charge base per user. Some are base their pricing on functionality, and others even base it on usage. So again, come up with a budget and then figure out what product can fit within that budget and what licensing model works the best for you. It's too difficult to implement. Yeah, it takes time, it takes resources, but if you have a dedicated team that knows what they're doing or they're getting help, definitely that can be taken off the table and mitigated if you do things properly. ERPs and swapping it out is going to solve all my business problems. I've heard that many times, and that's not really the case. What ends up happening is you're just swapping old technology for new technology. Your users and consumers of data then trust that new technology, think it's correct, and it's not. So what you've got to do is look at your people, your processes, and your technology. And processes play a big part into the technology change. And same thing with your resources to improve the overall business and experience that your employees will have with the system. That it's only for large companies? No, that's not the case. I would say it's even more so for small, medium enterprise, because what's going to start to happen from a cost perspective is those smaller organizations are going to say, I'm going to spend $50 a month to do my accounting. I'm going to do $30 a month to do my CRM. I'm going to spend $100 a month to do my document management. I'm going to do $50 a month to deal with my HR and payroll. I'm going to do $100 a month to deal with my reporting. And all of a sudden, you have all these disparate systems costing you money, $20, $30, $50 here, and you don't realize it until you put it all together and realize, oh my gosh, I'm spending $1,000 a month on my systems. Whereas if you had required an ERP system, that could be cut in half. So again, something to think about. So it's not just for large companies, smaller companies need to consider this as well. systems are inflexible. So while ERP systems are designed to integrate and automate your core processes, they can be customized, as we talked about, or personalized to meet your process or your requirements. They're going to eliminate jobs. For the most part, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and it's very rare, if ever, I've ever seen employees lose their jobs because they've implemented an ERP system. It's more so the fact that instead of doing the manual data entry and spending time fixing errors and doing things manually, they now can repurpose those resources to be more efficient, looking at analyzing the data or working in another part of the business to help make it more efficient and streamline it. So you're just reallocating those resources. I've barely ever seen it where they've actually eliminated jobs. And that ERP is a one-time project. So that's just not true. Again, we'll talk about this later, but you phase in typically to be successful. You phase in modules and you phase in features and functions. So you don't just say, okay, as our go live, we're going to do everything at once. Yes, you may have a capital budget that's going to take 3 years to implement or that you're going to roll out, but you'd go live with the first piece and the second piece and the third piece. And it's just continuous improvement, whether it's upgrades or reinvesting in training or optimizing the system. It's not one time. You should plan for a little bit of budget every year to enhance and continue improving your system. So how do you know you're ready for ERP? So the number one thing I would say is growth. I mentioned it earlier. If you plan to double or triple your business in the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be very costly to double or triple your workforce, especially in different areas of the business that may even need more resources. So if you're growing rapidly and you're struggling to find the data, an ERP system is going to support you in that. If your processes are inefficient, at the end of the day, things are taking longer to get into the system. Orders are taking longer to fulfill. Maybe you're having bad supply chain issues. Again, all that inefficiency is costing time and money. If you're seeing that, you should start thinking for an ERP system if you haven't already got one in place. Disparate systems or multiple systems. Again, I spoke about that briefly earlier. Again, be careful when you start to take track or inventory all of your different technology systems or IT systems. Take a look at what you're spending every month. Add that all up. You'll be surprised, as it might be higher than you think. I know for me as a small business, when I first started, I had 5 or 6 different systems and I was spending way too much. So if you can consolidate into one system to bring the cost down from all these other systems, you may be better off. And again, by having multiple systems, you've got what we call silos of data, right? So all your inventory is in one system, your sales might be in another system, your manufacturing might be, or your bill of materials might be in another system. Again, the data can't talk to each other, and without manual effort to combine, it's going to be struggle to get all that information in one place. If you have limited visibility or access to data, that's again, we should start looking for a new system or an ERP system. Compliance requirements, if the industry is quite strict and you have to start tracking this information to meet that requirement, definitely that's going to push you into an ERP system for sure. Customer demands and vendor demands. I've seen this before where if you want to work with a particular vendor, you have to send EDI or electronic purchase requests. If you can't, they're not going to supply you with product. Customer demands, again, you may need to provide more information to your customers. They may need you to have an ERP system in order to do that. And you need to be ready to invest. So again, it's the time, it's the money, it's the resources. It's an investment. I wouldn't consider it an expense. That's not just going out and not helping your business. It's an investment that you're going to leverage for years to come. And you're going to see the payback over time. So when sourcing an ERP system, so first things you would do is assess your ERP needs. So you're going to make a list of what are your requirements, what are your nice to haves, what are your must haves, what are your, well, if it has it, that's great, but it's not a requirement. So you want to document what your needs are going to look like. And then you want to define your budget. So you may say, well, Brian, I don't know how to define my budget. Is it $50,000 or is it $500,000? So what you can do there is you can start to reach out to different vendors, and you can create a document called Request for Information, or RFI. And we've done this a few times where you'll put your basic requirements together and you would send that to multiple vendors saying, I don't want you to bid and give me a super detailed quote, but based on what you've done for other companies in my industry, based on my requirements, can you give me a ballpark? And if you send that out to 3, 4, 5 different vendors, you're going to get 5 different numbers, but it'll be interesting then to take an average or take the high or take the median as your budget that you want to work with going forward. And once you get that, then you can drill down into your details a lot more and then create what's called a request for proposal or an RFP. And you can send it back to those vendors and say, now here's all the specifics. Give me a firm quote on what this is going to look like versus a generic high level ballpark. And also keep in mind with the budget that it's not just the software and implementation. You may need to hire new resources or employees. You may need to hire an external project manager, for example. You want to make sure that you're looking at the total cost of this thing, not just how much does it cost for the service and the vendor's implementation. And keep in mind too, if you're doing, say, barcoding or scanning and having third-party systems that are tying in, again, that may have 2 or 3 different vendors with 3 different prices that you put together to then come up with your overall technology or ERP budget. Research vendors. So, a lot of vendors will say, yeah, we can help you. So find out who they are, find out their industry domain experience, find out, when was the last time they did a project of your size, find out, can they handle your type of implementation? Do you think it's quite large? Do you think it's quite small? They may say no. So you just got to look at, who might be a good fit for you in the marketplace. And then you want to evaluate demos of the software and references. So you may say, hey, vendor, come in and just give me the basic demo, or you go to like the nth degree and you create a demo script and say, follow steps, 1 to Z or A to Z. But yeah, take a look at the software, ask for references, speak to those references, and see how they can provide information to you that's meaningful in making your decision. Conduct due diligence. So once you've identified a vendor and a solution, dig a little deeper, see if they'll provide financial information to see how stable they are, find out if they're compliant with any relevant regulatory government agencies. Just dig a little deeper on them if you can, or ask for additional references, just to make sure that this business is not going to go out of business while you're halfway through your implementation. And negotiate contract terms. Some big vendors like Microsoft or Oracle or SAP is like, yeah, you can't negotiate the terms of the software, but when it comes to the vendor implementing that software, there's oftentimes you can negotiate terms, whether you need, 45 days for paying an invoice versus their standard 30, or when you're going through the implementation, are they charging you on a time and materials basis, or are they charging you on a fixed fee basis, or are they charging you on like milestone payments? So every month you have to pay. So again, some of that you can maybe negotiate to be favorable or meet your needs. And plan for implementation. So this is a big one, right? I think of 80-20 rule here. So planning, I think, is 80% and 20% is execution. If you've got a good plan, you know what you're doing, when it's happening, who's doing what, and you've got the right people, I think the execution of working through it actually is not that bad. And you want to ensure that you've got executive stakeholders who have bought into the plan to make sure that they can help clear any roadblocks and support it. And you also want to consider like your busy periods and when key staff may be on vacation. So a lot to come in when you're thinking about planning for the ERP. So implementing ERP. So define your goals and objectives. So at the beginning of the project, you want to think about, what does it mean to be successful when we're completed? And sometimes what can happen is customers can think of success criteria. And so a vendor will say, give me your 5 top things that define success, or your top 10 things that define success. Way too many times I've heard companies say, oh, I want better reporting or quicker access to information. Well, what does better reporting mean, right? I want to increase my sales. Okay, by what? Or I want to cut down and streamline closing my month end from an accounting perspective. Okay, great. So you need to document what is the metric today. So it takes me 10 days to close my books. Okay, my goal is to cut that down to 7. I want better reporting. Well, what does that mean? That means I want to be able to get a sales analysis report every Monday on my desk by 8 o'clock. So define what those look like. So then at the end of the project, and say 6 months after, 12 months after, you can run that benefits realization, as we call it, to then say, hey, are we realizing the benefit? Are we meeting our goals and objectives, and were we successful? Create a detailed plan. So this is a good one that ties into your implementation plan. And part of that can be, I need a communications plan, a risk management plan, a rollout plan, a responsibilities plan. So there's lots of plans that fit inside of an implementation plan from a project management perspective. But by doing that, you're going to be ready for anything that comes at you. Involve stakeholders. So again, you want to have people from different departments maybe being involved and creating what's called a steering committee. So you may have someone from finance and IT and from the warehouse and from procurement and from sales and from the manufacturing. All those different individuals are going to have a different stake in the success of the implementation. So you want to bring them all together so they're all being updated at the same time and can collaborate and work as a team to move through the project. And typically they may meet, depending on the length of the project, every, maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the project. That's not a weekly thing for a steering committee meeting, but you'll have a project team meeting that you might meet every week or multiple times a week that are more hands-on to the project. Establish a dedicated team. So as I said there, that team will meet more frequently. They're the ones working with the vendor. They're the ones hands-on with the implementation, doing the setup, testing the system, making sure things are moving through accordingly. And yes, test the system thoroughly. So, test, and test again is the philosophy. The last thing you want to do is have end users go live with the system, and the first time they do something, it fails or they get an error message. Excuse me. You really want to make sure that you test the system before it goes to the next level. There's also what's called user acceptance testing. So this is a good system test to make sure that the system's set up correctly, the security for those users are set up correctly, and that those key end users or subject matter expert users know what they're doing, so then they can help the rest of the team accordingly. So test. Provide training and support. So this is an area where you don't want to skimp on. You want to make sure people get trained and they have support. So if something happens, they know who to go to directly. This can include creating training manuals or having standard operating procedures. I've even seen it where there's training videos. So we'll do a session and you'll record the session through Teams or Zoom that new employees and periodically people can go back and watch. Sometimes that's easier than going through a user guide. That's user preference at that point. Or if you say every month I'm going to bring the vendor in for an hour to do a Q&A session with all my users. So bring all your questions and let's train. And then monitor and review progress. So as you're going through, you're going to be having status reports. You're going to be meeting as a group. You want to make sure that the project is moving on pace and it's not being too slow, because what can happen is if you start slowing down and it's not going as quickly, users can lose interest and vendors can end up spending more money, which will eat the budget to then now all of a sudden, when you get closer towards the end, that could be an issue. So as we move into sort of the final food for thought slide here, at the end of the day, you want to start with a clear understanding of your requirements. What do you need the system to do? Why do you need the system to do it? What are your nice to have? What are your must have? What are those requirements? And then what are the things that, yeah, I could take advantage of that, or I could use that, but it's not critical. And that can even help separate different products when you're looking, because a lot of products do the same thing, right? So you're looking for that uniqueness with one of those products that's going to be the right fit for you. So understanding your requirements and what you're looking for is key. Assess your IT infrastructure. So talk to your IT department if you have one, and find out, how many servers do we have? What versions of software, what's the Windows version? What's the SQL version? You need to, at some point, have a good understanding of what's in place today, because that's going to make decisions on how you implement or A, what products you pick, and then B, how it's going to affect your existing environment. So if you're saying, I don't want to do anything on premise, I don't have an IT department, I have one person who helps me here and there, then a subscription-based software as a service product is perfect. You pay X dollars per month, it's on the cloud, you don't have to worry about upgrades and troubleshooting, it's taken care of for you. If you're more, no, I've got 3 people on IT, we have a server rack, I want the software on premise, I want to manage it, then great, everybody's different. And so understanding what you have in place, if that's your case, make sure you know what's there. Because you may have to do upgrades or get a new server or upgrade your licensing. And all of a sudden upgrading, say, a SQL Server license can cost you $10,000 that you didn't budget or plan for. And now what do you do? So know what you have in advance. Define the scope. So again, this goes back to your requirements, but understand what is the scope. So are you going to go big bang and try and do everything at once? Or are you going to roll out different modules as you go? Make sure once you've defined the scope and the plan that everybody knows what's happening. There's a term called scope creep, and that's a project killer, because what that does is you're going through the training and you're working with the vendor, and then someone in the session says, oh, what does that do? And then all of a sudden the vendor tells you, like, oh, we like that, let's do that. And if you do that too many times, that wasn't in scope, aka budgeted for, you're going to spend a lot more money that you didn't plan to spend, right? So make sure you know what your scope is. And if something looks like it's going to add value or work for you, and you're like, yeah, we should do this now, it makes sense, and you didn't know that when you developed the budget and the scope, you can create change orders or change requests. Excuse me. So that then allows that to become in scope. You get a budget approved, it goes to the steering committee, the sponsor says, yes, let's do it. Or what happens is you say, you know what, we like it, but we're not going to do it right now. We're going to put that in what's called the parking lot list, or a parking lot. So keep track of it. And then you can, once this project is done, you can see how the budget ended up. And if there's a bit of leftover, or the stakeholders or sponsors see there's value in it, you can do that as a phase 2 or a phase 3 and do it later. So know the scope and define it. Create a budget if possible, and even a return on investment plan. So that plan may even come in as a business case to getting the new ERP software. But at the end of the day, you can get a budget, as I mentioned, by doing an RFI or speaking to a company that can help get you this information and say, okay, generally speaking, you're going to need X dollars. The return on investment plan says, okay, if I'm going to spend X dollars, how is this going to save me money? And maybe there's a payback calculation you can do and say, in 2.5 years, this is going to pay for itself. Understand the numbers, if you will. Involve your team. So again, from getting end user buy-in and having success with people using the new system. Oh, excuse me, sip of water here. You can involve your team early on, right? So they may be part of documenting the requirements. They may be part of documenting the processes. They may be in the meeting saying why you should get a new system. Just keep them on board as much as possible, and even have them part of the demo so they can see what that new system might look like. It's key to get people involved as early on as possible. And from a change management perspective, we can even call these people like change agents. Excuse me. They are the ones that want the change, and they can work with the resources that don't necessarily want the change and help them convince them why it's a good thing. So get people involved early. Look for an experienced vendor. So if you can, you want to try and find someone that's worked in your industry before. They've been around for a while. They've got the right consultants. They understand the domain or your specific industry domain. So therefore they can offer a little bit more value added. Oh, you should do this because of why, where you may not have thought of that. So experienced vendors are nice to are pretty important. I wouldn't even say nice to have. I'd say that they're pretty important. And beware of customization. So at the end of the day, as I mentioned before, customization can be great in the short term, but over time can actually hinder your business through upgrades or adding in new features or integrating data from another system in that may cause an issue. And then from troubleshooting perspective, the technicians may not be able to support you or in a timely manner because they don't know you have something custom. At the end of the day, ask for personalization options. How do we personalize and tailor the system based on the way it's built to allow us to do that versus changing core code? And be prepared for change, right? If it's coming, it's going to happen. I've seen so many times where there's, employees that have been in the company 10, 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden, you're using a green screen DOS system, and now you're putting in a new cloud-based, Windows-based system that you need a mouse and a keyboard for. That's change, right? People need to adapt and be open to the change and be ready for it. It's going to come, right? People are used to doing things a certain way. You want to make sure that they've got the tools and the support to change. And, adopt a mantra or something along the lines of continuous improvement. I think at the end of the day, working with ERP, the ones that are the most successful with it are always trying to find ways to continuously improve, make the system more efficient, get their users trained, look for ways to streamline their processes by using the system. That's key in my mind. You're going to pay for something, so why not try and get as much out of it as you can? All right, I think, yeah, so our last slide here, just as the presentation summary. So what we looked at today is we talked about what is ERP, what are some of the features and benefits of ERP, what are the myths, and am I ready for ERP, or how do you know when you're ready for ERP? How to go about sourcing and implementing the ERP, and then just my final comments over the years on, food for thought to the group. So I hope that was beneficial. I hope you learned something there. And we've got some time for Q&A, I think 10, 15 minutes. So happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thanks, Brian. That was a lot of information there.
Yeah, and I can provide I'm sure they'll get the slide deck, or I can send over, or they'll have some access to the information if they didn't get it all down.
Yes, we are recording, so we will send this out to everyone once we have it. It's ready to go.
Perfect.
There's many benefits to using the ERP system for food processors, as I'm kind of seeing. It can help introduce new products to markets faster and cheaper than your competitors. It can ensure compliance to food safety regulations. It can help control costs through reduced wastage, optimum material utilization, and inventory management. It could help achieve end-to-end bi-directional traceability from the raw material down through the finished product. It can help improve operational efficiency of your manufacturing process. It also can help to have complete control of your business by accessing real-time data of production, sales, and distribution. And I can see it as a tool to forecast sales and orders, converting orders into production plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a great tie-in with ERP to our food processing businesses. Is there any questions from anybody? Brian, I think this is a fairly new kind of material to our food processors.
Okay.
We are going to encourage it for them to keep control of their plans. And I do see that there is a hand up. Amanda, what is your question?
Hi, good morning. This is all very interesting. I'm curious about, so inventory management was presented to me a couple of years ago in creating a system, but this is bigger than inventory management, right?
Yes, the ERP system will have an inventory management component to it.
Right.
But yes, it has inventory, but it's larger than just a standalone inventory system.
And so what do they cost? Like, what is the cost generally?
Yeah, well, that's a tricky one to answer, right? Because as I said before, the licensing for ERP systems can vary depending on the software based on the user count. You know, do you have 2 users using it or 200 users? Um, the different
Sure.
complexity levels. So, you know, I would find it very hard to just give out a number because it can vary so much. But if
Okay,
you're in
so like
a, you know, yeah,
I'm a small business
okay,
and we have 6 people on staff, and I'm not sure that all of us would need access to it.
okay,
I'm not, and like we do all of our own distribution. We currently use QuickBooks Online, and we're considering getting a CRM like Method, which is a pay per user tie-in to QuickBooks for that. So like in comparison to that, those 2 systems, plus I use like, the only thing I didn't notice on there was like a POS option. So like if we have customers that are
yeah.
direct, we would still have to have a separate POS system, correct?
No, so oftentimes these systems will have a point of sale component to it. So there's
Okay.
counter sales, or it can just be online sales. So yeah, there's different different systems that'll have those modules, or it may be a third party product that, again, so you would probably fit into like the tier 2 level. So if you're on the QuickBooks Online and you're growing, and you need something more robust, those tier 2 levels will have those main, like the main modules you need, but they may have a third party product that's sort of what we call best of breed. So it'll have something that's the best product for point of sale or counter sales or e-commerce, that type of thing. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's, you know, I don't want to give out a number, you know, it's probably going to be, you know, software and services, you know, it could be that, you know, $40,000 to $100,000 range, maybe, you know, so there is a bit of
Wow,
a
for
cost.
starting out. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
because what's going to happen is you're going to buy the software, right? So let's say the software, even on a higher end system, could be, you know, like $200 a month per user, right? So
Okay.
that's, if you had 5 people, say it's $1,000 a month. So that's one
Right.
component to it. But then you're going to have the implementation of that software. So it's not like plug and play like QuickBooks, right? You load
Right.
QuickBooks, it's all there. With these systems, you have to create a chart of accounts. You have to create a vendors listing. You have to do all these setups and configuration. And how is my system going to run through this? Well, if you've got your warehouse and your inventory, you're going to say, okay, what are my item numbers? What's my bill of materials? What are all my, you know, vendor specific information? So the person or the vendor implementing are going to ask you all of these questions, and they're typically charging you per hour or, you know, a flat fee to go about doing an analysis and design. Then there's the configuration. Then there's like the deployment and the training and the testing. And then there's like the go live and then all the reporting that sits on top. So again, I've seen projects where, you know, maybe you're at 100 hours of service, you know, and up, like maybe 120, 100 to 200 hours, you know, and most vendors are now in that $200 an hour range. So, you know, if you said conservatively 150-hour project at $200 an hour, so that's $30,000 in services right there. So that's where it's going to be the most expensive. But again, those are, you know, the upfront, get it done. And then on a go forward basis, you know, if your subscription is $1,000 a month for 5 users, that's pretty doable, I think, for most organizations. And what you'll hear after, I don't know if it's directly after me or at the end, about getting government grants to help offset those implementation services. So I don't want to scare you and say it's, you know, $100,000 or $50,000, but just think of some context of you need a partner who's going to come in, understand your business, ask you all these questions, and then go and set up the system, help test the system, get it going live. That's where you're going to spend the most money up front. Does that answer your question or give you some guidance there, I hope?
Yeah, well, if that's how much it costs and those are all the other things, I'm just wondering, like, it's not able to pull from my current systems, the data, it all has to be re-entered.
No, so there's a data migration piece. So if you're saying I'm going to move off of QuickBooks and get into, you know, a different type of ERP system, all that data can be exported. But in some cases, like with QuickBooks, I use QuickBooks Online for some stuff, and like for my vendors, for example, I just call it, you know, Brian Hack as a vendor. For example, in a system, there's going to be a vendor ID. So it may be like BHack001, and then there's the name, the address, all the buying information that's associated that you may not have in your current system. Maybe you want to do electronic fund transfers, so you have to get banking information for vendors. So, there's a little bit more than what you have today that'll be required or could be useful for you in the new system. And at the same time, too, if you're doing a change, now is the time to look holistically at your organization and say, okay, well, in QuickBooks, I've got a one segment chart of accounts, as they call it, right? You have a main account, call it, 4,000 is sales and 5,000 is cost of goods sold and 1,200 is inventory. Well, in a new system, you create segments or have dimensions. And the dimensions could be the main account, maybe a location, maybe a department, maybe a region, maybe a customer type. That's very important. So all of a sudden, there's new things that you don't have today that you can have and should have that the vendor is going to walk you through. But you're right. You can hit export, get your inventory list, do a bunch of cleanup on it, and then hit import and import it into the new system. But there is setup information that will be required. So another example is inventory. You can create different inventory classes or inventory groups, which you may or may not have in say, QuickBooks, or you have it in an Excel spreadsheet if you're tracking that today. You can have warehouses, you can have locations, you can have bins. Again, I don't know your entire organization, but at the end of the day, those key setup fields or values have to be in the table. So when you import the data, it validates against something that exists. And oftentimes I see that in data conversion. You can't upload something if the master record isn't there.
Okay, that's cool. Is there like any like thresholds, right? Because you're saying like we all operate out of one location. We do all of our own distribution. We're under 500,000 in sales a year. Like, where is there like a threshold that's like, oh, okay, there's some like just markers that maybe you should consider this option? Like, I think it's a little bit too much for what we have. But after your comment about like, look at how much you're paying for QuickBooks, look how much I'm paying for Method, look how much I'm paying for my POS system, right? And kind of put it together. Are there any markers like that as a business owner I should just kind of like keep my pulse on?
I would just say, I don't want to say like you need to be at $1 million in sales to then, look at an ERP system. I think it's all those other factors, right? How efficient do you think you are? Because that does come with an upfront cost, right? The implementation cost is what's going to get you. So once you hear later on about if you qualify for the Canadian Digital Adoption Program and you can get funding, that can help cover a lot of that. So I would say, look at those systems, say, okay, realistically, I'm spending $800 a month, or maybe it's $300 a month. You just need to do a little bit more research with the different products and vendors to find out if I move to your system, that's going to give me all these great features and benefits. How much is that going to cost me a month? And then do that cost analysis. And then the implementation cost is just going to be, a one-time thing just to get you up and running. And then from there, it's a small maintenance fee every month, perhaps, or that continuous improvement. So I'm just hesitant to say, yeah, at this point, you should move. There's just so many other factors, and happy to have a conversation after this as well if you would like. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. We have another question here. How reliable are ERP systems in terms of cybersecurity, system crashes, and things like that?
Yeah, so they're very reliable. Especially if it's cloud-based. So if you're dealing with Microsoft or NetSuite or Oracle, all those companies have all the proper legislation in place. They've got all of the backups and restores, all the fail-safe overs, like if the internet goes down, that's stored somewhere else. So from that perspective, you're super safe on the data side with those massive vendors. The downside is if you have a subscription-based service and you're maybe more in a rural area and your internet goes down, then that may be a bit tricky because you can't connect to your system. But if you have a backup internet connection, so if one provider goes down, you switch over to the other, then you're up and running, then you're fine. If you look at having your data sit on your own servers, that's a little different story. I have had customers that have been hacked with ransomware, where someone's going to hack into their server, lock their data, and all of a sudden you can't get to it anymore. That's a little trickier because now you need a little bit more of training on users about phishing emails and clicking on links that they shouldn't. So you got to work with your IT department on that. But as far as security, safety of the data in the cloud, it's pretty solid. I wouldn't worry about that one. It's more on premise that you have to be concerned about.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I think that's all that I have right now. Oh, we have one more
I have
question.
one, if I may.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I see, like, one of the, I guess as a funder of this, working for Manitoba Agriculture, one of the opportunities I envision for companies being able to exploit, hopefully, and I guess I've seen this in walking larger facilities, so I'm not sure to the extent of how much scale is required to do this, but I'm thinking like a process flow on the processing floor, you know, in terms of raw materials in at one stage, you know, the mixing stage, the cutting stages, the baking stages, you know, whatever, like through that. Is that something that is, I guess I'm wondering, Brian, is you know, what scale do you see is necessary before someone is able to think about those sort of things, and is fairly doable in terms of the machinery that's out there these days?
Yeah, I think.
You know.
Yeah, again, it's a tough one, right? I think if internally the project team or, you know, the resources and the company can go through and document that process and look at the workflow and the operations as it moves from stage to stage, that's good to have a basic understanding from that perspective, because that's going to then drive the work centers and the route when you put that into your system. So at some point it has to occur. But like from a technology perspective, you know, I don't think there's so Jeff, is it more around what technology to help document that, or is it more at what level should you document that?
Yeah, I guess it'd be in terms of how easy or how difficult is it to actually integrate different components in a process and get them talking to each other.
Yeah, okay.
Probably it depends, I imagine.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I did it wasn't food related, but just as an experience that I can relate to with kitchen cabinet manufacturer, right? So they manufacture kitchen cabinets. So you go onto the shop floor, you know, I guess the first stage is they'll create the order, it'll go through a CAD design, the bill of materials will get pushed out and it'll go to the first stage, and then the first person starts the process. So, you know, the system that you will look at will have a more manufacturing focus than more, say, like an accounting or distribution focus. You want to find a system that's good for manufacturing. So it's going to have all the work centers and the routes, and the bill of materials is going to push in to say, take 3 of these and 6 of those and 2 of those, and help you. It's going to do that for you and move the product along the cycle. So as you go from, you know, computer machine to the next one, it's going to do that for you. I think that's just inherent in some of those manufacturing systems for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, I'm available for any further questions. If you think of something after the session, please feel free to reach out to me directly or through Karen and the team, and they can pass on the information as well.